to their screams.
Greetings, ghouls and creeps, and welcome to Listen to Their Screams, a horror podcast. We are your hosts. I am the one called Dave. That one is the other one. He's called Ike. Ike, how are you?
You know, I'm probably, if I'm looking into the future, I'm probably doing pretty good. I'm probably on a cruise ship somewhere.
Yeah. Because like we said last episode, this episode is being pre-recorded. We are on vacation. We are on a cruise, and this episode is being released February 2nd, Thursday, February 2nd. Ike, yeah, we're still on the ship on that day, I believe, aren't we? Yeah, we don't get off till Friday, I think. Right? Is that right? Or do we get off?
We might get off on Thursday, so I may have lied. I may be somewhere in Louisiana on Thursday.
Yeah, at this point in real life, we may actually be just slightly depressed because our vacation's winding down and we're off the ship. So this might be a real shitty day for us, actually. But in the fantasy world of Listen to the Screams, we're recording this ahead and fucking everything's hunky dory because we're here, we're with you, and we're talking horror movies. So wherever you listen to us, make sure you subscribe and make sure you follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Letterboxd. You can find us on those at Listen to Screams. As we say every episode, thank you to Kayla and Monica. They're probably at this point in life probably a little sick of spending so damn much time with us on a cruise ship and probably wanting a little breather room. No, I kid. And as we say every episode, and we'll say again later also, though, we do discuss movies. In the course of discussing those movies, we may spoil things, so you have been warned. This is your first official spoiler warning. Ike, we usually right now we discuss what we watch and what we did and everything else, but like we said, we're knee deep. We're winding down vacation, so we probably didn't watch much of anything, and if we did, it was something we downloaded that we've watched a million times probably. That we watched, in the cabin at night or whatever it might be. So I don't think there's much to say there.
I was going to say, this is just a little snippet in case anybody's curious. When you go on a cruise ship, they do have TVs in the room, right? And they do have the movie channels. But let me tell you, it has gotten better. But once upon a time, the movie channels would recycle 10 movies, right? And they were movies from over 10 years ago.
I recall the year. Remember when your brother watched? Was it Pitch Perfect 2?
I think so. It's one of the Pitch Perfect movies.
Like a fucking dozen times on this week cruise.
Because he was.
What a life, man! What'd you do on vacation? I ate chicken wings and watched Pitch Perfect 2 like a dozen times.
So if I remember correctly, he was seasick, so he stayed in the room a bunch, and yeah, he watched Pitch Perfect 2 and ordered room service, which, to be fair, at the time it was free room service, so yeah. That's kind of a vacation if you think about it.
Yeah, he loved it, right? He enjoyed it, right? But
right.
Yeah, and unfortunately, for the sake of our discussion, I mean, when you're on a cruise ship, right, which are those are kind of family-oriented vacations, you don't really get horror offerings on those channels, and they do the what do they call it? The theater, whatever.
Dive-in movies.
Yeah, the dive-in movies up by the pool on top of the ship. They do those movies, and those they don't really have horror options there typically. They're more cartoons or family movies or superhero movies, lots of Marvel movies, stuff like that. So you don't get a lot of horror options. And those things I understand, right? But
I will say this time around, because I remember because we have a little in RL little peek into our real lives. We have a group chat, and somebody posted movies that are going to be at this one. And to be fair, there are some pretty adult themed movies on this one, like Bullet Train.
Yeah.
And Elvis, Jurassic World Dominion.
Yeah, there's some good movies on the list this year. This is probably this because we've gone on several cruises, right? We've done this several times. Shit, and I can't find I was trying to find the list in but there's legit some pretty strong movies this year.
The Batman, that was another one.
I said I enjoy that, which is weird because I've never been a huge Pattinson guy, but I like the Batman.
Love the Batman.
Here we go. And I haven't watched Elvis yet, and I've wanted to watch that, so that would be a fun one to watch. And I love the Jurassic World movies. I haven't seen Bullet Train yet, and I've wanted to watch that. So that would be a fun one. And then Top Gun Maverick, which I love that movie too. And then again,
that one.
there are some kid movies, of course, but again, no real horror options per se, except unless you want to classify Jurassic World as a horror adjacent movie. But
horror adjacent.
Yeah. But before we go, I always download some movies and some TV on like the iPads and stuff to kind of watch at night and stuff. So I'm sure there'll be something horror related there. And I usually do. I do quite a bit of reading on the ship. I like to read, and I don't get as much time as I would like to read in my day-to-day life. So I kind of take that, to lay out in the sun and read. So there's a good chance that I might be have my nose stuck in a horror related book. There's no doubt going to be some horror related stories that we'll have to tell when we get back. Hopefully not real life horror type stuff. Hopefully nothing happens. We do have some port stops. Hopefully nothing bad happens and whatever else. But so there you go. That's the most. Well, I mean, we can't really say what we watched because in this fantasy world, legit, the episode you listened to last week, we just recorded. We're recording them back to back. So, but like we said, to be transparent, our next episode coming out on February 9th, we'll be catching up on news and anything that came up in the world. We'll be discussing all that then. We'll have lots of stories. We'll tell you some cruise related stories. Hopefully you'll stick through those because they may not be horror related, but I'm sure they'll be interesting. We'll only give you the cream of the crop stories and everything else.
The Cliff Notes version, if you will. Yeah,
we'll give you the highlights. But this week on this episode, we are discussing. We're going to review later in the show My Bloody Valentine from 1981. When we talked about coming into 2023, we thought it's pretty cool now that we're past Halloween and Christmas and stuff like that, because now we can not only hit the new releases, but we can discuss some classics, right? Some old stuff. We catch on some movies like that, and this is one of them. My Bloody Valentine, of course, came out in 1981. It was kind of a bit of a trendsetter in the world of slashers, right? It's a very early slasher. So we're going to review that later in the movie, later in the podcast episode. But right now, we're going to play Top 3.
Top 3.
On this episode's Top 3, we're going to discuss our top 3 favorite supernatural movies. Now, Ike, I have to be upfront with you here, okay? I have to be completely upfront. When I sent you this idea for this one, right, and said, hey, let's do this, because we have a list of top 3 ideas, right, that we're always throwing out there, and I put them on a list so that we can pull off of. I very strategically did not put the word horror in this, and I just put supernatural movies, because my number one movie on this list, I wouldn't classify necessarily as a horror movie, but it is definitely a supernatural movie. So there's a little teaser going into our list here. But before we do that, when we do this, when we discuss a genre or a subgenre of horror movies like this, we like to give just a little Cliff Notes version, as you said, of what that means, right? And I'm gonna read off kind of a definition I pulled together from sources, and you tell me what you think of a supernatural movie. It's a movie that is of or relating to an order of existence beyond the visible, observable universe. An example, it oftentimes pertains to ghosts and demons.
Yeah,
that's a lot of a big part of it. So it's basically the unknown, right? We have what we can see in the world, and that and if you were to have monsters in a movie, that's very visible, that's very real, even if they're not in real life. That's that. But the stuff that we can't explain, or we can't disprove or approve or anything, right? We don't know, right? You can't, at this stage, we can't prove or disprove ghosts and demons, et cetera, right? It's just not. So that's where, man, people could really dive in creatively into this and give their own spin on it. So, Ike, what do you think of that definition? Do you think that kind of sums it up in a nutshell pretty well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with supernatural, when you hear those words, it almost invokes, like you said, the ghosts, the world beyond our own. I think supernatural can be applied to a lot of different things. One could make an argument for zombies and monsters, but I think that generally supernatural really pertains to, like you said, something that is unknown, something that has little to no explanation, something that is extraordinary, if you will. And I definitely feel like the ghosts, the demons, the above our own universe, stuff like that, and the beyond, if you will, that definitely plays into what I would say is the supernatural, I would say.
Yeah, and oftentimes especially with movies, a lot when you discuss supernatural and you discuss these things, lots of times it pulls in many aspects of religion, right? There's a lot of that ties into it because religion touches on these things a lot, right? Religion keys a lot on the afterlife and in the soul, and and again, of course, in my head when I hear supernatural, I think of the TV show that I'm obsessed with and that I love, right? But in that right, there's the way they break it down kind of that show, and this is what it's kind of a vague view of this. A human has a soul, right? And when they die, the soul can go to heaven, right? And live in their dream, whatever, their memories, playing their greatest hits, whatever you might call it. Can be caught in the veil where it's just kind of hanging there in limbo. It can still be tied to the real world and the earth, in which time, over time, essentially the soul, the spirit, becomes demented and twisted, and that's where you get ghosts and things like that. Or it can go to hell and it becomes a demon. It can become a demon, where that's where it really gets twisted and whatever else. So it all ties kind of, and again, so it plays a lot of religious factors oftentimes with these stories, not necessarily, that always play into it, but obviously, that's a heavy can be a heavy tool in telling these stories. So anyway, that's kind of a long version of trying to explain, in our view, what a supernatural movie is. So let's dive into our top 3 favorites. Ike, we'll let you start as we always do. What is your number 3 favorite supernatural movie?
Absolutely. So I kind of struggle with this one. Let me preface this by saying that I struggled. I struggled because there are so many great supernatural movies, and there are so many just man. So okay, so let me start with this. All of mine are definitely like ghost/demon related movies, 100%. These are all of mine are pretty cut and dry because I was like, these are the ones that compel me. So the one for me, the number 3 is The Conjuring. So
that's ironic. That's my number 3 as well.
Oh no shit. Okay. So a lot of people don't like the Conjuring movies, and
I love it.
I love the Conjuring movies. All of them are good. Annabelle, all the Conjuring movies are fantastic. The first Conjuring movie, in my opinion, is probably one of the best out of all of them. I love Patrick Wilson. I would watch Patrick Wilson do anything. He's a fantastic actor. I also really like, oh gosh, I forgot her name. Her name is Vera Farmiga. That's what it is.
Yeah, there you go.
And yeah, I mean, honestly, it has a lot of other great people in it too, like Lily Taylor, Joey King. But the Conjuring movie, the first one, it really sets up this character of Ed and Lorraine Warren. Now, I know obviously there's been some kind of controversy with Ed and Lorraine Warren in the real world because Ed Warren wasn't always a very good person.
Right.
But I like to say the Conjuring movies, it's a different person. It's a different character. It's more of a character than it is a real depiction of who Ed Warren was. And the first Conjuring movie to me, it has some of the most compelling acting in a horror movie. I think one of my favorite scenes in the entire movie is towards the end where they find out the demon's name. It's like Bathsheba or something like that. And Patrick Wilson is reaching through the floorboards and like presses a cross against this woman's head. And he's like, Bathsheba, I condemn you back to hell. And I'm just like, every time I see that, it gives me like cold chill. Like it gives me like goosebumps because I'm like, wow, like this feels real. But I remember The Conjuring was like sort of a Paramount movie in the early 2000s, well, 2013. That for me really kind of put me on the track of like liking supernatural horror movies. So number 3 is The Conjuring.
Yeah, same for me, kind of for the same reasons. I enjoy them. I like the Conjuring movies, and to me, man, it's almost. And I'm not saying if it's the best or whatever else,
Right.
But it's kind of one that you can hang up on a wall and say, this is kind of your textbook kind of supernatural type movie, right? If you just want a definition of what one is, it's kind of like this. And again, that's I know there's taste involved in that, but and I think one thing that does appeal to me that it does have that toe dipped in reality with the Warrens, right? I mean,
right.
And what they did, so that's kind of cool to me. That it's while it's not a straight up depiction per se, there is some elements there, right? And there's some of that there, and I enjoy that. And again, you were right. This when we did this, and I was coming up with this list, I really kind of thought to myself, man, we probably should have narrowed this down and done supernatural movies by a decade or something, because there are so many supernatural movies. There always has been, but especially even now. I mean, there's so many. There's so many good ones. There's so many that are not necessarily that good too, but it's just so broad that maybe we should have narrowed it down, but we were already kind of dove in. But so again, my number 3
we can
also
narrow it down in the future. I think we can comfortably return.
yeah, we can revisit. But yeah, also my number 3 is also The Conjuring from 2013. So let's just kick straight back to you, Ike. What is your number 2 favorite supernatural movie?
Right. Oh man. So there was, again, I really struggled because there's so many good supernatural movies. So honestly, I think that we should. I just want to comment. We do need to revisit because there's so many more supernatural movies that I would love to include on my list, like a top 50. I can't. But my number 2 is a movie I watched a few years ago, and it was a movie I've been really looking forward to watch. I didn't get to see it in theaters, but then I caught it on Netflix. It's The Autopsy of Jane Doe. So, The Autopsy of Jane Doe, for people who haven't seen it, is a film where a dead body is delivered to a morgue, and the dead body has some, I would say, some pretty inconsistent things about it. It seems like it's missing some things that you might need to function as a human being. And a father and son duo of coroners, they're pulled into sort of a mystery, if you will, and it starts to unfold as they continue on with this autopsy. But soon, the supernatural kicks in, and it's one of the more compelling stories I've seen in a supernatural movie. It also is unique because it's not your typical haunting movie. It's a movie that is progressed by the autopsy. The autopsy is basically the catalyst for all of the possession and all of the spooky stuff that happens. But yeah, The Autopsy of Jane Doe is very interesting. Like I said, very compelling story, very compelling mystery. It had me intrigued the entire time. And if you are like me and you have a hard time sometimes finding like good supernatural movies that really just entice you, this is one of the ones that I would put in my list of like you should watch.
Yeah, I've not seen it, so I can't really comment much on it. But it is a movie that I'm aware of, and I remember it's one that I've wanted to see. So again, that's one I'll have to pencil down on my list to watch. So I can't really comment much on it. But my number 2. This literally has got to be one of my favorite horror movies, period, of all time. It would have to be, I don't know, probably, I'm not going to put it way up there, but probably in my top 25, 30 of all time. It is such a fun movie to watch. So enjoyable. And, of course, one thing that really sets it apart is it has Matthew Lillard in it. My number 2 is 13 Ghosts from 2001. Yes. I love this movie. I love the concept of it. I love the collector aspect of it. Of course, I love Matthew Lillard. The movie is so fun to me to watch, and it is so well presented, so well acted. I think it's a very, very fresh, clever approach to this kind of stuff. It's different. It's not your typical possession. Someone's possessed here, right? Bring in the priest. It sets it apart as far as the supernatural type stuff. I think it's a kind of a fresh take on it. So, Ike, what do you think? Against my number 2 on the top 3, what do you think of 13 Ghosts?
Oh, absolutely. I love 13 Ghosts. 13 Ghosts is probably it would probably make my top 10 favorite supernatural movies. I would probably even put it in like my top 20, 25 favorite horror movies. Obviously, Matthew Lillard is probably one of my hands down favorite actors of all time, which, small side note, shortly after this episode goes up in February, is going to be Pensacon, which Matthew Lillard is actually going to be at Pensacon.
We're going to discuss Pensacon here in a little bit. So yeah, you're right. It just announced. Yeah,
just announced. He originally was going to go, but he had scheduling conflicts because he was recently cast as William Afton in the Five Nights at Freddy's live action movie. And so he had scheduling conflicts. But anyways, so yeah, 13 Ghosts. It to me, 13 Ghosts. It has the cheese of like the early 2000s, but like it has such a good freaking story, dude. Like, I mean,
It does.
It's literally the 13 Zodiac ghosts. It's talking about like different types of ghosts, how they died, catching them, and all this other stuff. And like, I would love for them to make like a movie or a TV series just talking about each of those Zodiacs, like each of those ghosts, how they died.
It would. It'd be a great pickup for a streaming service to do like a series on.
Oh, 100%. I literally, I have sat down and I've had hour-long discussions with people about how this movie, The 13 Ghosts, it is probably one of the most underrated, like, supernatural / horror movies of all time.
It's so creative. So creative to me.
That house alone, it's creepy, but it's unique, and it has all, like, these moving parts, and I love it. 100%. It was almost on my list, but it was just a little bit below Conjuring for me.
Yeah. Well, it's my number 2, which brings us to our number 1. So, Ike, what is your number 1 favorite supernatural movie?
Oh, Lord. Well, I'm gonna say it, and we both have a person that we know who hates this movie, and I love this movie. It is probably, again, this is probably my top 5 favorite movies of all time.
I know. I bet I know what you're gonna say. Go ahead.
Yep, It Follows.
Yeah. Just so you know, the person you're speaking of, I live with, and
yes.
just so you know, your love of It Follows is a point of reference. A lot of times in discussions he has where he'll say something about, especially if he says something about you, right? Here he is. Hopefully, I'm not going to start heat here, but I don't think it's anything you don't know. But a lot of times he'll say, someone will say, "Oh, Ike said this," or "Ike likes this." Wherever it's like, "Oh yeah, but Ike likes It Follows too."
No, yeah, he says that shit
not
all
like
the time.
movie at all.
Oh my god. Yeah, he has. I'm not gonna name him because I don't know if he's comfortable with me saying his name, but
No.
he has such a hatred for It Follows. It almost makes me like it more that he hates it so much. But no,
Just
like,
out of spite.
out of spite. No, I kid. So when It Follows came out, I actually worked for the movie theater, like AMC. I used to work for AMC theaters way back when. I was a proprietor of the popcorn, and
Popcorn slinger.
That's right, popcorn. That's a fancy way of saying I slaved away behind the concession stand. But no,
Popcorn engineer.
that's right. It's like a sandwich artist at Subway.
Yeah.
But oh Lord. But no, for real though, I saw this movie, and me and my wife, we were dating at the time. We both watched this, and we both loved it. This was one of the first movies that we watched together because my wife, she didn't really like care for horror movies when we first started dating, just because she hadn't really seen many. So I kind of got her into watching more, and lo and behold, she loves horror movies. It's one of her favorite genres now. But It Follows was one of the early movies we watched together at the theater. And it is a fantastic movie. It has a very, I would say, creative concept. Now, obviously, it's basically a ghost or like a paranormal entity that follows you that only you can see. And the way that it follows you is if you have sex with somebody who had the ghost before. So obviously, it's sort of
supernatural STD.
Yeah, it's kind of a commentary on STDs. I mean, that's really what it is, I think. But it's a great movie. It's a very ambiguous movie. It has a very ambiguous ending. I liked it a lot. I would love to see another movie. But yeah, it's a very contentious movie because there's a lot of people who don't like it, but there's a lot of people who do. It's one of my favorites.
Well,
my favorite supernatural, I guess.
Yeah. Well, one thing here to comment on people that don't like horror movies. I say this a lot with certain kinds of music too. If you say you don't like horror movies, I just feel like you haven't seen the right horror movie yet, right?
Right.
Because a lot of people have preconceived notion about what a horror movie is and don't realize there's a lot of different types and different ones. And they think it's just all blood, guts, and you know, it doesn't always have to be that. Anyway, I'll be straight up with you. I have not watched It Follows. I have purposely not yet watched it because I don't want to get in the middle of all this, right? Because I have you on the one side saying you love it, him on the other side saying he hates it, and I don't want to pick a side here. So I'm just like, if I don't watch it, I don't have to have an opinion on it. I feel like at some point I will watch it. Now maybe I'll just have to keep my opinions to myself. But I also feel like that at some point in time you're going to make us review this movie on this podcast, and I'll have to watch it. So so maybe I'll just save it for that moment. So anyway, that brings me to my number one, which is really, it's out of left field, right? This is not a horror movie at all. It is a supernatural comedy. But my number one favorite supernatural movie of all time from 1984 is Ghostbusters. And because I love Ghostbusters. Especially the first one. Love that movie. It is such a great movie. When it came out, I was 9 years old and I was obsessed with hunting ghosts. And again, while there might be aspects that some people might find a little scary, a little whatever you want to call it, it's not a horror movie, right? It's just not. But that's why I purposely just said supernatural movies, because it is a supernatural movie, right? They hunt ghosts. But I mean, come on, the cast is it's just extraordinary. It's got such a great cast, such a funny movie, it's just a great movie. It's an iconic movie. It's just a trend-setting movie. So I purposely approached this a certain way so that I could have Ghostbusters on my list. I'm not gonna lie to you, I kind of played this one. But so that's my number one. I assume you like Ghostbusters, though, right? The first one.
Oh yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, who doesn't like Ghostbusters? I mean,
I'm sure somebody does. Those people are just wrong.
I don't see how you couldn't like Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters are pretty. I would say it's a pretty, a universally liked movie. I mean, it has a lot
Bill Murray in it. Come on.
I mean, Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd. Now, obviously, Dan Aykroyd's kind of lost the shit in the last few years.
But he's still funny.
He is still funny. The late and great Harold Ramis, Ernie Hudson. I mean, Annie Potts, freaking Rick Moranis, Sigourney Weaver.
Come on, the whole movie. It's such a good cast.
I mean, these are like the all-stars of like the 80s and 90s, and yes. I mean, how do you not love this movie? No, absolutely. I love Ghostbusters. I love the new movies. I even like the remake. I know a lot of people don't like it, but I like the remake with the women.
I don't like that. Oh, no.
No? Oh.
No, don't like that one. Oh.
I enjoy it because of the novelty of it. But I also really like Ghostbusters. Was it Afterlife with? I
do like Afterlife.
Yeah,
right? I enjoy Afterlife. I even enjoy 2 as a little bit. It's not near as good as the others. It's a little weird, but not the remake one. No, I don't like that one.
But in any case, though, I do love Ghostbusters. You can't hate.
I'll tell you what.
Hate Ghostbusters.
No. If the remake didn't have Chris Hemsworth in it, it would have no redeeming quality in my mind. But anyway, so yeah, there you go. And in last episode, we talked about iconic vehicles in horror movies, and I'm telling you, I wanted to put Ecto-1 on that list, but since I couldn't really be defined a horror movie. But come on, there's not. I mean, that's such an iconic movie vehicle, and
it really is.
I mean, as I sit here and look over my shelf, where I have about 3 die-cast Ecto-1 sitting, so great stuff. So such a big part of my childhood, though. So there's so much nostalgia there, anyway. But let's take a break. And when we come back, we're going to discuss news and upcoming releases.
Remember, in the course of discussing movies, the host will spoil plots. You've been warned.
All right, we're back here on Listen to Their Screams, and now let's talk about some news and upcoming releases. And like as you mentioned earlier, we're going to talk. We like to mention conventions. But this is kind of the cream of the crop of conventions, and it is Pensacon. It is February 24th to 26th at the Pensacola Bay Center in Pensacola, Florida. You go to pensacon.com for more information. Pensacon is a North American multi-genre convention founded in 2013, which takes place once each year in Pensacola, Florida. As of 2018, the convention draws an attendance of more than 25,000. Features around 100 media guests, encompasses 5 venues in downtown Pensacola, and runs hundreds of hours of programming for fans of science fiction, fantasy, comic books, and other elements of fan culture. Some of the guests include Dee Wallace and Danny Patero from Cujo, Skeets Ulrich, and, as we mentioned earlier, Matthew Lillard from Scream, and many, many more. And let me just say this. The many, many more does not even begin to encompass this guest list. We just keyed on a few there that were kind of horror related or horror adjacent. There are so many guests at this convention, whether you're a fan of whatever TV series, whatever movie, whatever genre of pop culture. If you're a Doctor Who fan, there's like the world's largest gathering of doctors and companions. There are so many damn people, and they're constantly still announcing a new guest. It's remarkable. This is such a huge convention. And it's right there in your backyard.
Yeah, absolutely. For people who maybe don't know, both Dave and I are Indiana natives. We both were born and raised in Indiana, but we have in our adult lives have moved away from Indiana. He moved away a few years ago. I moved away just earlier in 2022 actually, but I decided to move to Florida. I've always kind of liked Florida. Some other stuff that happened. I was like, yeah, Florida's probably going to be best. And we happened to move to Cantonment, which is a little suburb kind of outside of Pensacola. And one of the first things that I did when I got here is I was like, I need to establish two things. I need to establish where I can get a really, really good burrito. And I also need to establish where can I get my con fix. I found the burrito and I found my con fix. So Pensacon, literally 10 minutes away, 15, 20 minutes away. I can't remember exactly where the convention center is, but I've seen it. Super excited. Like you said, the people you have listed is not even a fraction of the number of people who are going to be at this convention.
Not even the biggest guests. But
no,
we just pulled some. There's unreal guests at this convention. Unreal guests.
Absolutely unreal. And there's going to be vendors, there's going to be food trucks, there's going to be everything that you could possibly love. So yes, I'm definitely going to be going. I'm going to be going that Saturday, so I will be there.
All right. And then coming up on the merchandise scene, this is something that immediately caught my eye because I am a fan of I'm a huge fan of Friday the 13th. I'm a huge fan of vinyl. So let's combine those two. At BigBadToyStore.com now, you can pre-order the Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter, original motion picture soundtrack on vinyl for $42.99. I've got to get this, right? I love vinyl. I got a record player in the front room. I've had one for many, many, many years. Got a vinyl collection. And so I'm a huge fan of vinyl. Of course, I love Friday the 13th. This is spectacular. Part 4, one of my favorite of the movies. So I can't wait. I think I'm going to have to just go on and pre-order this sucker to make sure that I get a copy, because I'm assuming it's going to end up being probably a limited release thing. They don't do, endless, amounts of these things. So got to get on that.
Part 4, arguably one of the best Friday the 13th movies. My personal favorite. I did not see this when we were talking earlier. So that's pretty exciting. If you buy it, I'll definitely have to come over and listen to it.
Yeah. So some upcoming birthdays. February 4th, the birthday of George Romero, of course, known for the Of the Dead movies, kind of the godfather of zombies, pretty much there, coming his birthday on February 4th. And then upcoming releases. We only got one, and this is the movie that we're going to review next episode, coming out on February 9th, is Knock at the Cabin. It is released in theaters on February 3rd. While vacationing at a remote cabin in the woods, a young girl and her parents are taken hostage by 4 armed strangers who demand they make an unthinkable choice to avert the apocalypse. Confused, scared, and with limited access to the outside world, the family must decide what they believe before all is lost. Starring Dave Bautista, of course, former professional wrestler, and Drax in Guardians of the Galaxy, and Rupert Grint from Harry Potter. It's directed and produced by, however you say his name, M. Night Shyamalan. I can't ever say his name. How do you say his name?
I'm pretty sure it's just M. Night Shyamalan.
There you go. That's what I thought. So M. Night Shyamalan. And again, we're going to try to watch this, and we're planning to watch this when we get back on vacation and when it comes out. And we're going to review this on our February 9th episode. Ike, this is one of the big movies that I'm looking forward to this year. We had that list that we talked about, some key releases that are really, really exciting, that stand out. And to me, this is one of those releases.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. I'm so excited for this. I recently watched Glass Onion on Netflix with Dave Bautista, and I'm just like, man, I want more Bautista. Bautista's such a good fucking actor, dude. I cannot even begin to explain. I think out of all of the professional wrestlers to have created an acting career, Dave Bautista is, in my opinion, one of the best. John Cena, he was all right. The Rock, I'm sorry, I love The Rock. The Rock is a good guy. He was fantastic as Black Adam, but all of his roles are the same. They're the same character, and I love Dave Bautista so much. He's good in everything I've ever seen him in. Oh my god, I'm so freaking excited. I also love M. Night Shyamalan, despite some of his not so good stuff. For people who don't know, he's given us such beautiful things as Signs, The Village, The Sixth Sense, Old, Glass, Split. I mean, Devil, he was a producer on. Oh my god. He did also create The Last Airbender, which was like that Avatar live action that we don't talk about because of how horrible it was. However, I'm excited for this. This is going to be a good movie. Knock at the Cabin. It's going to be. I'm excited. High hopes.
It is. Yeah. I mean, his movies are known for having, a twist to them, right? I mean, that's kind of the expression. There's usually this tweets to them. So I'm excited to see what happens with this, and it's always fun to watch the movie and try to see if you can guess what it's going to be. So, but again, we'll be watching that movie and reviewing it next episode. So that's the only upcoming release we have. Again, due to the pre-recording, stuff like that's a little limited for us right now. But let's take a break. Yeah, that's right. Let's take a break, catch our breath. When we come back, we'll have our review for 1981's My Bloody Valentine.
Listen to Their Screams is now a Fangoria collaborator. Get 20% off your order at shop.fangoria.com by using the promo code LISTEN2SCREAMS at checkout. That is listen, the number 2, and screams. Or you can click the link in the show notes.
All right, we're back on Listen to the Screams, and here it is. We're going to dive into My Bloody Valentine from 1981. You can watch this on HBO Max and Hulu with subscriptions, and of course you can purchase it digitally on most platforms. The movie was made to capitalize on holiday slasher movies following the success of Halloween and Friday the 13th, starring Paul Kelman, Lori Hallier, and Neil Affleck, which of course is no relation to Ben. And it is a decades-old folktale surrounding a deranged murderer who's killing those who celebrate Valentine's Day, and turns out to be true to legend when a group defies the killer's order and people start turning up dead. It was filmed in actual mines in Nova Scotia, and Ike, watching this movie, you can completely 100% tell that it was filmed in Canada by those accents, eh? I love that. I love when I watch a movie, and I'm going to be real. All right, I'm a professional wrestling fan. My identification of Canadian accents is based on Canadian professional wrestling and watching Stampede Wrestling back in the day and different things like that, and I can tell those accents. And then, of course, also I hear it a lot. Again, here I'm going to bring up the show Supernatural, which was filmed in Vancouver, and you can hear a lot of those accents there. So, but again, you can hear the accents. You can tell it was filmed in Canada. When it was released, the MPAA cut 5 minutes from the movie right before the release because of the cultural backlash to violence following John Lennon's death, which happened right before the release, it's kind of interesting. I'm not sure what the tie-in is there, but whatever. I don't know if John Lennon worked in a mine at some point. I'm not sure, but they do weird stuff. Again, this came out in 1981, so it's very early, and kind of that slasher craze, right? It kind of, we talk about how Halloween kind of kicked off a lot of that, right? And that was in 78, so we're just talking 3 years removed. And it has created quite the iconic character in the minor, right? It's merchandised quite a bit. You see lots of figures and things. It's a very recognizable visual character. And again, it's a fun movie to watch. And again, it was remade in the 2000s, tying back to Supernatural, starring Jensen Ackles from Supernatural. He was in the remake of it, which, again, my wife said, "Oh, as much as you like Supernatural, I can't believe you didn't do the remake." And I'm like, "Okay, we gotta do the original first before I get my Ackles love on." And
That's right.
But who knows? Maybe someday. But again, that's what we watched. What did you think of My Bloody Valentine?
Yeah. Do you want me to hit you with a hot take now or later?
Let's start with the hot take. Let's just dive in. What do we got?
Well, I'm about to give you a pretty hot take, hot off the presses. As much as I liked the 1981 My Bloody Valentine, I'll preface this by saying that, like you said, it definitely was a good movie. It was your typical slasher film from the 80s. It definitely kind of played up on a lot of the tropes that you see in earlier slasher movies, namely Halloween. Like you said, it had a very cool character in the minor. My hot take is that the remake in 2009 was better. I know a lot of people are purists. They like to, stick to the classics, and I respect it. And typically I am too. I'm a very firm believer that when you look at movies like Halloween and Friday the 13th, the earlier films are better than the remakes generally. The remakes aren't bad. It's just the original films are typically better. But I have to say that with My Bloody Valentine, I much more enjoyed the 2009 version than I did the 1981 version. In my opinion, the 1981 version, like I said, it's a very typical slasher film. It's a very common tropes, everything else that was being unfolded before you. But you kind of even mentioned it. I think the best part about this series and the 1981 movie is the killer. You have this guy who's donned it's not a gas mask, but it's like an oxygen type mask, isn't it? That's what they use to help filter
the
contaminants.
Stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So he has that mask on. He's dressed up in, full gear to be in the mines. He's carrying around a damn pickaxe. And I will say I do have a little bit of I think Dave might remember this. So when I was
going to bring the story up. Yeah.
When I was a lot younger, it was like a year or two after the 2009 My Bloody Valentine. I think maybe even not even a year. We went to a haunted house in Indiana called Fear Fair. In Fear Fair, they would take popular concepts, popular movies, and they would turn them into a haunt. And one of the popular movies was My Bloody Valentine. And I had a friend, I won't say his name, but I had a friend who went with us at the time who was chased by a guy dressed as the miner from My Bloody Valentine.
Yeah.
And I mean, he was chased
yeah,
clear down the building by this guy.
This was even before going in, right? He was like outside. And he
we
cracked
were
a comment at him or something, and the dude literally chased him around the block. It was pretty funny.
God. It was great. It was hilarious. But absolutely, I like the movie. I like the concept. I like the character. A little bit of sentimental value. I like the new one better, but the original was pretty good.
Yeah, honestly, I think I'll agree. I think I like the remake a little better. Some of that might be the Jensen Ackles bias on my part. But I do appreciate the 1981 because it does have that cheese that would I like it in slashers. And one thing I like about the 81 one is the characters in the movie are so funny to me, right? First of all, there's some goofy ass dudes in this movie, right? And they are just nonstop horsing around. They are drunk horn dogs the entire movie, right? All they care about is where they're going to get drunk next and who they're going to sleep with next. And it's a very much a sign of the time because, right, there's some behavior that might be not over the top inappropriate, but just not really acceptable with some of how they talk to women and things like that, and objectify women almost even. But there are some people in it who are the Hollis character cracks me up. The guy with the mustache, he is just hilarious to me in this movie, right? And one thing that I like about the 81 that really has nothing to do with per se with the movie itself is some of the guys in it, like Alf Humphreys, who plays Howard, one of the goofy guys in it. I absolutely love him because he was a deputy in First Blood, the first Rambo movie. And I remember him more for that. But so when I see him in this, I'm like, oh my God, it's that deputy from First Blood. And then Neil Affleck, who we mentioned, plays Axel, right? Who, spoiler alert, is the main dude in this movie, pretty much ends up being, again, it's a 1981 movie, for crying out loud. If you've not watched it in 40 plus years, right, where Axel turns out to be the killer, right? But Axel is very big into animation stuff now here lately, and has directed and had a part in many Simpsons episodes, in the Simpsons movie, and many other things. And it's wild to me that now he does something like that, and you don't realize it until you start looking into these guys. So that's a kind of a cool aspect of it to me. Of course, there's the guy in the bar named Happy. Because what did slasher movies in the early 80s, they always had this crazy, weird-ass, drunk, off his rocker kind of guy who was the only guy who tried to warn people and know this shit, and no one listens to him, right? You also have the guy in the Friday the 13th early movies that's trying to warn everybody, but no one wants to listen because he's just a crazy town drunk. But they end up being right. And in this movie, you had that too. So this movie is your prototypical early 80s slasher, right? It is... Yeah. It is cut and dry. There's no real surprise. Pretty much going through it that it's not going to be the hairy guy that they're talking about, right? Because they mentioned it very early. There's going to be something to it. So you're expecting it, right? And it turns out to be Axel, and they're like, oh, his dad was one of the supervisors that was killed, et cetera, et cetera. So you don't. Well, it's like, oh, that's kind of, oh, that's cool. You expected that something was going to happen, and then it makes sense in the context of the movie, right? Because these two are Axel and I think his name was TJ. Were fighting over the girl, and TJ used to date her. Axel dates her now. They're arguing and fighting the whole movie about her. But it makes you very much want to side with TJ, right? Because they make Axel a little bit of a dick in some points.
Right.
So it's not surprising that Axel turns out to be the villain in this thing, because they kind of drop the hints. But again, it's a fun movie, right? It's very much a slice of 1981 slasher movies. It is very prototypical. The thing that sets this movie apart from some of the many other movies that came out in that time period is the character. The Miner is so visually marketable, and and again, that was what that time was, right? You wanted that character that you could put on a poster, that you could put on the VHS case, and that you could, do with, and that you could say, just the visually seeing him alone would make people say, oh, I want to see that movie, because what is this guy? And the Miner was that. He was very distinctive, very marketable, and I would say alone drew a lot of people in to watch this movie, even without knowing anything else about it. Obviously, it's called My Bloody Valentine, right? It's going to be about a killer related to Valentine's Day. You knew what was going in, and you saw the guy. I mean, it sold itself.
Yeah.
So again, it's a fun movie. No big surprises. It's a prototypical early 80s slasher movie. Over the top acting by some of these actors, kind of cheesy characters, goofy characters. I've hung around with guys before, and when I don't know. I've never been around guys that act this completely off the wall. Maybe it's just who I associate with, because I'm sure there are people that do. But it's weird. Again, all they ever focused on was wanting to drink and wanting to have sex. And I understand that's a driving force behind a lot of people in the world. But I mean, the point where they're like kind of early in the movie where they're running out of the mine, right, where they got off work and they're all in the showers and stuff. And then they run out, and fucking Hollis is like running around with his pants half down, and people are trying to jerk him down, and they're like kicking each other, getting in the car. I'm like, what the fuck is this? I mean, I've never worked at a place where this shit's happening. Someone's going to have to say something to, this is not workplace behavior.
Honestly, I feel that way about a lot of movies. I'm just like, I want a movie that's like HR compliant. Like, this doesn't seem like it's HR compliant. I'm waiting for the human resources manager to walk in and be like, yo, what the hell's going on here? Yeah,
we're like, I don't know, Bill's pulling Hollis's pants down in the parking lot, and suddenly Cheryl appears and says, yes, Bill, we would like to see you in the HR office now, because that's and Bill doesn't get killed off, but he gets suspended from work because of his behavior in the parking lot. But no, again, it is a classic movie in the horror world.
Yeah.
But again, the movie's fun. The movie's enjoyable for what it is. But I'm going to say at its core, My Bloody Valentine, this one, the 1981, and why it's become so iconic, boils down to the Miner and how and the appearance of that. Again, watching one, I would agree. I would enjoy the 2009 one to do on a watch if I was going to watch one. And again, I might have a little bias because Jensen Ackles is in it. But again, it's no knock on this movie, because for a movie made in 1981, that's it's not bad. It's pretty good. There's some things that are all right in it, with the old lady being in the dryer, and the guy walks into the laundry mat, and it cracks me up because he keeps smelling. He's like, he smells something, and he's like smelling his cigarette, and he's smelling those things. Like, what did I smell? Not, he doesn't hear the thumping noise and think that maybe the two are. I mean, come on, dude. You're supposed to be the law enforcement in the town. Can't you correlate that there's an odd smell and this weird noise? Come on. But
you're telling me the smell of a dead body isn't common?
Maybe not, but and again though, it's kind of a cool little niche that that the hearts put in the candy boxes with the note that's kind of plays into that Miner character, and it's kind of cool, right? It's kind of creative, it's kind of creepy, and it gives that character some substance. and it's a neat little part of it. But again, for 1981, that's all right? It's a pretty fun movie,
Yeah.
and what they could get away with. So Ike, out of 5 screams, what would you rank 1981's My Bloody Valentine?
Absolutely. We talk about the rating scale a lot, and I think for me, this one's going to be probably just a 3 out of 5. It's a middle of the road movie. I didn't hate it. I didn't overtly love it. It was a good movie. It has a lot of classic nostalgia from the 80s and what horror movies were in the 80s. It also has, I would say, probably one of the more iconic slasher villains of our time. So I'm going to give it a strong 3 out of 5.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 3 too. And again, what's saving this for me is the minor, is that character. Yeah. It is a creative setting, right? You don't, they did something different, right? It's not in a summer camp. It's not in a college dormitory. It's
or a
not
suburb.
or a suburb of a town. They were creative with it, right? They put it in the mines, tied it into that. The backstory between the folk tale or the story of the town and what happened. It was a creative approach and setting. Now, it was 1981. They said, okay, we've told you the basics. We don't have to flesh this out anymore. So that is what it is. But I'm going to give it a 3-2, and to me it's saved by the character, number one, which again, it is a visually wonderful character to see. Yeah. It does look creepy, and it is one of those characters that if you came around a corner and bam, you're face to face, you're going to piss yourself a little bit. It is scary, and
I've seen it firsthand.
Yeah, that's right. and it does sell. It's enough to sell the movie on its own to me. Is that character, right? And again, I think the creative setting plays into it a lot. So I am just going to give it a 3. It would be lower if it were not for probably that character being so iconic in my mind. But again, I do have to agree with you, though. If I were going to recommend someone watch one, I would tell them to watch the 2009 one, and if they really like it, then maybe give this one a try just to see where it came from and what inspired. So
I will give My Bloody Valentine one piece of credit, though. They were like, let's make one movie and get the fuck out of Dodge. They didn't make
that is true.
dozen sequels. They didn't try and beat it into the ground, which in my opinion, I think that's the reason why the remake is so much better, because there was only one. There was only one. They didn't overuse the character. They didn't beat the idea and concept into the ground. There was one movie in 1981, and then there was nothing for
almost 30 years.
30 years.
Yeah. Close to 30 years. I mean, we're talking 28 years?
Something like that,
yeah. And again, because of that character, there was still figures and merchandise and things happening between the two where it was never out of the eye, and people they remember, right? You remember the minor. You remember that character, and it was enough, literally is enough. And again, I know it sounds like I'm completely besmirching the entirety of this movie, but that minor and that character and that visual is enough to hang the whole thing on, the whole franchise on. And it worked. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing, because like we've talked about before, it's hard to create that iconic looking killer that stands out in your mind, right? And if people think about My Bloody Valentine, they may not remember a lot of the details, right? They may not remember some of the lesser characters, the Axels and the Hollises and the TJs or whatever it might be. They may not even remember all the details of what it was about. They remember that character, though, and what it looks like and how creepy it was. And sometimes that's all you need, right? And when you're in this genre, well, if you can make some money and you can do some business if you've created that. And again, it is odd. I'm not sure, maybe I should have looked into it a little more, the rights to this and who owns it, whatever, because it is odd, though, that there was only the one movie. And again, I don't know. Has there ever been a straight to DVD or a straight to streaming attempt at a sequel? Because
everything that I'm seeing is no. I mean, when I go to IMDb and I type in My Bloody Valentine, I get the 2009 one, I get the 1981 version, I get the Irish alternative band My Bloody Valentine.
That's
But
weird.
I don't.
It is very.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is very odd that, so I don't know. I'm guessing whoever owns this is kind of protective of it a little bit, right? Or either that, or there is a complete conglomeration legal mess involved with the rights. It's probably one of the two on who
That's very
created
possible.
it and who owns what. So, and again, that does, that helps sometimes, right? Because oversaturation can sometimes kill something, especially when, maybe your foundation is not the strongest in the world, right? I mean, you're not talking this iconic, all-time great movie per se, while it is enjoyable. I mean, what were they going to do with it? I mean, I have to admit though, I've seen this movie many times. I've always wondered what happens to Axel next. What does he do next? Right? He's, the way he's yelling at the end, he's completely off his rocker a little bit. Does he ever get free? Does he ever try to go back and get TJ and what was her name, Sarah, and get some revenge? I don't know. It's odd to me that they never, in any capacity, tried to explore that.
I will also say this. I do like the remake better, but one thing I will give the 1981 credit for, they didn't try and make it in 3D, which they did do with the 2009 one. They tried to make it in 3D, which was kind of meh. But I'm not a fan of 3D movies, if I'm gonna be honest.
If My Bloody Valentine had been about, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years later, they might have tried it in 3D then too. So
true. That is true.
that I know, but it is what it is. So there you go, 3 out of 5 screams for My Bloody Valentine. Again, it's a fun watch. It's it's not that it's a waste of time to watch. It's fun. There's a few good scenes, a few good laughs, some enjoyable characters, even if they are a little over the top. So it's one of those movies though that I feel if you're a horror fan, you got to watch it at some point, right? You just have to check it off your list and say you've watched it. Just again, for the character alone. So again, next episode we are going to review. We'll be back, right? So we'll be back on a regular recording type schedule, and we'll catch up on any news, breaking news, anything that comes out in this couple week time where we had to pre-record episodes. So we'll get all caught up on all that stuff, and we will review the theatrical release Knock at the Cabin on that episode. So Ike, before we get out of here, anything you want to say or throw out there?
I got nothing, man. I got nothing.
Me neither. It's tough when you're pre-recording this stuff, right? Because it's like, I feel like I got a lot of those thoughts out on the first one we pre-recorded. And so it's like, I didn't save anything in the tank to throw in there in this one. So, but again, our vacation will be over. We'll be back to our regularly scheduled recording schedule, whatever you want to call it. I know I said schedule twice, but anyway. So until next episode, wherever you go and whatever you do, be good, be safe, and have many pleasant nightmares.